Happy Friday, folks. Yesterday was dull, but there's some things that came up that we need to talk about. Bill C-3 in particular, well, it got the attention of a lot of people. It got the attention of those in the House, got the attention of those on the ground, and we are going to talk about all of it, including it getting the attention of those in Quebec. And Quebec is making it known that they are done with the shenanigans in Ottawa, and they are putting their foot down and saying, if you push us any further, it's going to get ugly. It is going to get ugly, and it's going to be your fault. Things are interesting here, folks. We're going to talk about all of it. Welcome to the Elevate Podcast. Happy to have you on the show. I'm your host, Josh. If you get any value from the show, you find it interesting, and you find it valuable to your understanding of how politics are going, feel free to like, share, and subscribe. It really helps the show, helps us to grow, and helps us get another viewpoint to the discussion that the mainstream media simply doesn't offer. Now, let's get in the first story, shall we? So Bill C-3, an act to amend the Citizenship Act. And this was one of 4 bills that were tabled this past week. And all 4 bills were, well, interesting. The 4th bill, C-4, was the most, I would say, welcomed of the bunch. But Bill C-1, 2, and 3, there was a lot of issues, a lot of problems, and it got the people going. We're going to talk about Bill C-3 today. However, we will be talking about all the bills tomorrow and discuss everything that has transpired this past week, so make sure to tune in for that. But Bill C-3, this is the one that really got the people going. This one really got the attention of many, especially those who are like, hey, so we're struggling with our healthcare, we're struggling with our housing, we're struggling with where people are going to live, we're struggling with people having access to our basic necessities here in this country. Why are we bringing in more people? That's a legitimate question a lot of people had, especially during the campaign. And Liberals, Carney campaigned on, don't worry, folks, I'm the guy you hire in a crisis. I'm the guy who you bring in to close it all down. I'll take care of this. We'll make sure we get our immigration levels to sustainable levels. Well, sustainable levels. Well, we're at this point. Over 800,000 people came in 2025, the first quarter of 2025, and there's no signal that it's slowing down. And then they bring in Bill C-3, where they look to nix what they call the first generation Canadian rule. I'll show you what I mean. This is the background of the Bill C-3 here. It says, Canada's Citizenship Act contains a first-generation limit to citizenship by descent for individuals born abroad, which generally means that a Canadian citizen parent can only pass on citizenship to a child born outside Canada if the parent was either born or naturalized in Canada before the birth of the child. Canadians born or naturalized in Canada before adopting a child abroad can apply for a direct grant of citizenship for the adopted child. As a result of the first-generation limit, in general, Canadian citizens who were born outside Canada and obtained their citizenship through descent cannot pass on citizenship to the child born outside Canada and cannot apply for a direct grant of citizenship for a child adopted outside of Canada. So to break this down for you, say your name is Jake. You were born in Canada, Jake, and then as you grew up, you grew older. You then decided to move to a country abroad. You then live in that country. You then have a kid in that country, and let's call them Emma. Jake has a kid named Emma, and Emma is technically a Canadian based on what the current rules are, the first generation limit. So Jake, born in Canada, moves abroad, lives abroad, has a kid abroad, raises their kid abroad, but his kid named Emma is still a Canadian. However, Emma grows up in that foreign nation and then has a kid in that foreign nation. Under our current laws, her child is not a Canadian citizen because, well, it wasn't born in Canada. Their parent wasn't born in Canada, and their parent was only a citizen because their parent was born in Canada. So this rule came in, I think this law came in 2009, the first generation limit, saying, okay, we can't just keep giving our citizenship away for, well, nothing. It gets to a point, it's like, okay, you lived outside the country, you stayed outside the country, your citizenship was passed down to you by your parent. You yourself cannot continue to pass that down if you live outside and your kid was not born here. That was the rule. That was the law. Liberals this week tabled the law saying we're going to abolish that. Doesn't matter. We're going to make sure you can pass on citizenship. Doesn't matter the limit. It can go multi-generational. You don't have to be here. You don't have to live here. As long as you are technically Canadian in some degree, shape, or fashion, you can, whatever kid you have or kid you adopt, can become a Canadian citizen no matter where you live in the world. And this was just a weird bill to table, considering the affordability issues that we're having, considering the healthcare crisis we're having, considering that we are just being overrun at this point and our institutions can't keep up. That is just the reality. So for someone who campaigned saying we're going to get this all under control, for someone who campaigned says we're going to make sure we limit our immigration numbers, or someone who campaigned on we are going to take care of all this, well, it feels like there's a lot more, there's other bills that should be tabled that aren't the third one of the 45th Parliament. This was a weird one. If the Century Initiative wasn't what you really wanted to be doing, then why do we need this? If we're struggling with the amount of people we have in this country right now, why are we bringing in bills that are essentially going to make more Canadian citizens? And it's going to add to the backlog even more and continue to bloat and slow down our institutions here. It's a question that a lot of people are having. And sure, we can have the debate about this specific bill and like, should they, shouldn't they, should there be a first generation limit, this, that, the other. I just don't think this is the conversation we should be having now, when we just had over 800,000 people immigrate here in the first quarter of this year, which is about 3 times the amount that we typically have brought in over the years before Trudeau. And then we want to bring in this bill to naturalize more people to become Canadian just by literally a swig of a pen. If this goes through, the amount of Canadians that are recognized in our country will balloon like no way before. And that's not saying that everyone's going to start coming here. However, a good chunk of more people are going to be coming here because, well, I'm a Canadian citizen now. You can't stop me from coming in. And my friends, this is from my perspective on this. And this is just Josh Udall's perspective on this. As things are getting crazier in this country in terms of immigration, as things get more bleak, as more people compete for less resources, the idea of mass deportations is going to become more of a mainstream conversation. I'm just going to tell you how it is. That's naturally how this is all going to go. So if this bill goes through, it'll make it really hard on a conservative government to do the quote unquote mass deportations. Because how are you just going to justify taking away people's citizenship and deporting them? Like, how do you reason that with our current Canadian population? It's a tough one to reason with. I know there's people, oh, of course, we just do it. Yeah, okay. Try justifying that politically in our current political climate. Not going to go well unless things get even more worse, because we keep bringing in more and more people to compete for fewer and fewer resources. You can dislike it with whatever way you see it. However, the reality is the reality. How is this all going to come together? How is this all going to get back under control at the end of the day if we keep trying to inflate our population numbers when our infrastructure is not keeping up and there's no evidence that it's going to keep up? Well, it's a question many are having, including the likes of Quebec. Right now, the federal government's not doing its job. Right now, the federal government is actually trying to expedite more and more people coming here when we are already overloaded. And Quebec says, okay, well, we aren't in control of immigration in this country, but we'll be in control of our own destiny. And this article came out yesterday. Quebec floats cutting services for non-permanent residents. Quebec Immigration Minister Jean-François Robert said he isn't ruling out the possibility of cutting services for non-permanent residents in the province if the federal government fails to have its annual immigration targets. At a news conference on Thursday, Robert presented a report outlining the Coalition Avenir Quebec government's potential immigration targets for 2026 to 2029. If we're forced to make difficult decisions, we'll make them. We're not at the point yet, and we don't want to get there, Robert said, underlining that the provincial government spent $500 million last year to support asylum seekers. He added that the state of public services in the province is unfair to Quebecers who pay taxes and are already struggling to see family doctors and find housing. The report describes 3 scenarios the government is considering to bring down the number of permanent residents from this year's target of 66,500. Thresholds could be lowered to 45,000, 35,000, or 25,000 over the next 4 years. Robert said that the government would focus its non-permanent immigration reduction efforts in Montreal and Laval to facilitate newcomers settling into regional areas where French is less threatened. He said it also intends to prioritize current non-permanent residents for permanent residency. We are quite aware of the reality of what happens when people come and when we hear their stories. We see that the government narratives that currently is in place differs greatly from what they're telling us, she said. We do hope that the government chooses to reevaluate their numbers and consider the experts' opinions on the topic. Public consultations on the CAQ government's immigration plans will take place in August. This is probably one of the most bold things we've heard from the provincial government in our country on this issue. These immigration numbers need to come down to sustainable levels that we can figure out and settle people into our society and settle people into our culture and as well have the resources available to them so that they can live good lives. Pretty simple. And they said if the government doesn't do their job on this, then we're just going to have to start cutting services for non-permanent residents. We don't want to get there. We don't want to be there. But if you leave us no choice, that is what we're going to do. Quebec's not playing on this. And the fact they're vocalizing this, and the fact that you just vocalized last week and passed an act last week saying, we don't believe in multiculturalism as the federal government does. We believe in integration. Quebec isn't playing. How much further is this federal government going to push them? And how much further is the federal government going to push the other provinces when it comes to this issue? We'll have to wait and see. Because even Conservative MP Michelle Rempel-Garner brought this up in the House of Commons yesterday, asking why the federal government brought in 500,000 students into our country when we are in a housing crisis, we're in a healthcare crisis, we're in a food crisis. Why are we bringing in more people? And well, the response from the Liberals is, well, fairly predictable.
Promised to cap foreign study permits, which also allow people to work in Canada. But new data shows that the Liberals blew their cap out of the water by handing out a whopping 500,000 foreign study permits last year, roughly the same population as all of Halifax. Why did the Liberals bring 500,000 foreign students to Canada during a massive housing shortage and while youth in Canada can't find jobs?
The Honourable Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for that question. Those figures are inaccurate. It's misinformation. This new government is hard at work to improve our immigration system, and the introduction of Bill C-2 Tuesday was an example of that. We are taking significant steps to preserve the integrity of our system, while also upholding our humanitarian commitments, because we understand a well-managed immigration system is essential to a safer, stronger Canada.
So gather that, right? What the figure that the member opposite brought up was simply misinformation. And well, Michelle checks her real quick.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
So I got those numbers from the minister's website. I went on the website and I read them. So in the middle of a housing crisis, she brought 500,000 people to Canada. These people compete with Canadians for jobs, require housing and healthcare. If her department's numbers aren't the real numbers, what are the real numbers?
The Honourable Minister.
It's a very good question. Really good question. Let's hear the answer.
Mr. Speaker, let me give
Rattled.
the opposite member a
Rattled.
lesson on immigration and on numbers and on permits of visa. There's many applications and many individuals. We recognize that to balance our immigration and to balance and have a good country, we need temporary and we need permanent residents. Some applicants have multiple numbers, and so therefore I would suggest that we look into those numbers a little bit more in detail. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, earlier in question period and debate, the minister accused me of misleading the House. I'd like permission to table the data I referred to that was from her website. It might help her out. I can deliver it by page if that's what she would like. It's
Consent, unfortunately, there's no consent.
Promise to.
There's no consent here. There's no consent. What a check in the House of Commons. How diabolical and disgusting of this Liberal minister to say, that's misinformation. And Michelle Rempel-Garner says, okay, friend, okay. I got this from your website. And she provided the link right here. I'll attach it to our show notes as well for you to watch and read, because they're not wrong. 516,000 study permits were issued last year. How can you justify that? As Michelle pointed out, with so much that our country currently faces, we don't have enough to take care of all the people that are coming in, and yet they still doing stupid crap like this. How can you justify that? Well, they can't. So they have to call it misinformation, and then got called out when it was on their website, and then try to act like, oh, there's a lot of figures going around. Blah, blah, blah. Shut up. Enough's enough. We're done playing stupid games. Now, tell us what the real issues are. But anyways, enjoy your Friday. I love you. Have a good one. I'm out.